Welcome to episode 14 of the 15-Minute Coffee Podcast with Brandon Salazar, your go-to destination for expert perspectives and valuable insights from the world of business. Today I'm here with John Guarino, the former president at Coca-Cola Canada. And before we get into the questions, I'd like to thank Mr. Guarino for being a guest on the podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
All right, let's start with, tell me about your early life and your career that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I would just start. I'm from Lower Bucks County, just across the river from Ryder. And I grew up in a steel town. Almost everybody in the town's father worked in the local steel plant in Fairless Hills. And I enjoyed my time there. I graduated high school. I played a lot of ice hockey, and I really enjoyed ice hockey. I didn't have a lot of focus coming out of high school. My focus was mainly on ice hockey. Uh, so when I graduated high school, I didn't go straight to college or university. I played some ice hockey, went up to Canada, tried to be a little more of a serious player, but eventually it really wasn't going to work out in Canada. So I came back home, joined a local team, worked a little bit in a restaurant and on a moving truck and in a factory, and basically said, I really need to do something with my life here other than what I was doing. So that was pretty much a lost year. Maybe some would call it a gap year now. But I decided I really needed to go off and get an education. And that's when I started at Rider University. And ultimately, I was in the College of Business, and my major was in industrial and labor relations. And I enjoyed all my time at Rider. I really thought I was going to go into labor relations in terms of negotiating with unions. And I had an internship when I was at Rider with AMF Head. Then in Princeton, they had a plant there making tennis rackets, believe it or not, in Princeton. And because of that internship, I got hired by Philip Morris in New York in their corporate headquarters in a management development program in human resources. So I did that for about 2 years. It was rotating assignments, and I was in the domestic division, the corporate division, and the international division. And like many people, I think I loved what I was doing, but I realized that's not what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my career, working in human resources. So I left and went to Boston to Northeastern University, got my MBA. And once I got my MBA, I was offered a job in Switzerland in strategic planning. And so that kind of set me up from the international career that I had, was really on that decision I made to get my MBA and then getting a job offer in Switzerland, which I thought would be a 2-year assignment and very interesting. But it ended up, I lived overseas for 29 years. But really, that's how I started my international career, was getting that job in Switzerland.
Nice. And how would you say working for Coca-Cola has impacted your life?
Well, in terms of impacting my life, obviously, my life revolved around my work. My family and I, living overseas and moving countries, every 4 years or so. My son was born in Switzerland. My daughter was born in Dubai, and they grew up there until they went to university in the States. They grew up overseas. So really the impact, that I had with Coke first was really just from a personal level of experiencing all these different countries we lived in, all of my responsibilities of running international markets. But one thing, really, Coke becomes the international community, the expatriate community becomes a little bit small. So your work tends to get really mixed up a little bit with your personal life in a good way, not overburied or anything. So really that impact to me about Coke, from a personal perspective about my life, was really just about experiencing all the different countries that we lived in and that I traveled to, that we traveled to, that I was responsible for. But of course, how it impacted my life and my career was really giving me a extremely international perspective, because I was running Middle East markets, then I was running African markets, then I was running European markets, then I was running all of them together. And what happens is, well, there's a lot of travel involved in that. So a lot of time away from home and from the kids. But no 2 days ever were the same. I could be, working 2 days in Pakistan, and then I'd be in Dubai for the rest of the week, and the next week I'd be off to Russia, and then maybe Norway or Finland. It just, everything was different. The businesses were different, the cultures were different. So the diversity, the experiences that I had running these international markets was incredible. But it wasn't just the differences of these markets and the international business. It was really about everywhere we went. You were talking about the local culture, and as I say, no 2 days were the same in terms of business, but they weren't about the cultural experiences that I was getting either as I was traveling the world. So it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that must be amazing. Did you happen to pick up any languages when you were at those countries?
I did. I mean, I was never fluent, but uh, living in Switzerland, the language, yeah, I lived in Lausanne, Switzerland, which is French speaking. So I picked up some French, and then a lot of the North African countries, French was the main language there. So I was able to use French quite a bit. And then when I moved to Berlin, Germany, we were posted there for 4 years, and became pretty decent at German. I mean, I couldn't negotiate a contract or an acquisition, certainly in German or French, but I did enough to be able to communicate with the employees, with third parties, with customers. And it was very important that you learn the language. I mean, I didn't want to be over there and living internationally that long and only be speaking English. It just really, you're in a community, you need to be learning some of the local language. And as I say, I was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the local people just appreciated that you were trying to learn their language, because unfortunately Americans have a bit of a reputation of never trying to learn a second language. So the people did appreciate the fact that even if English or French wasn't perfect, you were making an effort, and speaking the language brings you a little closer to the local culture as well.
Yeah, I like how you know highlighted the point of multiple languages. So it's funny because I know a few people from Europe, and it's like common that they know like Dutch. From some places they know Dutch, French, English, some Spanish, and it's
Yeah.
strange to see. It just opens so many more doors. So it's
Well,
a
yeah,
great,
it is. It
yeah,
it is incredible in Europe, and of course, I mean, look in Switzerland, German is an official language. French is an official language. They have a local language called Romansh, which is also local. But as they always say, you mentioned the Dutch. I mean, you know, if we needed to speak a different language to go from Pennsylvania to New Jersey or Connecticut, we would probably be a little bit better. But the truth is, Americans aren't very good at languages, because English not only is spoken here, but pretty much everywhere in the world you go, you can find people speaking English. So you can get a bit lazy, but I highly recommend always learning another language besides your mother tongue.
yeah. So let's change to this question of, can you talk about a pivotal moment or decision in your career that significantly impacted your trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a lot of little ones always. You do a good acquisition, you win a great market share battle, great advertising campaign that turns the brand around. But I think those build up collectively. But I think what I'd talk about is really, as I said, I went to Switzerland, and I was in the strategic planning department. It was a pretty sexy job. We were doing acquisitions. Eastern Europe was beginning to open then. This was before the fall of the Soviet Union. There was really a lot going on in these markets, and it was just a fantastic job. And after about a year and a half, they came to me and said, "Look, John, we need you to go up to Sweden to do a 6 month short term assignment." And I said, "Oh, well, what is it in?" And they said, "Well, there's a lot going up in the Scandinavian countries, and we need you to work in government relations because there's a lot of government relations. There's a lot of threats in terms of taxation and regulation and ease of doing business. And we need you to go up and lead a team for 6 months until we hire somebody permanently. And I really, it threw me because it was like, well, I'm in love with what I'm doing in strategic planning. It was a great job. And now I'm kind of being asked to do this staff job, if you will, for 6 months, which really I wasn't thinking of. I had my own career ambitions. But I did it, and they asked me on a Friday afternoon and said you need to be there Monday morning in Sweden. So it was a very interesting dinner that evening with my wife trying to explain that. But we did it personally. We enjoyed it. We love Sweden. The job was interesting, and I got to learn a lot about the Scandinavian markets. 6 months finished, and then I came back to Switzerland and they said, well, hey, we need you to go work in the budgeting department for 3 months because they're shorthanded and they have all of these things that have to be submitted uh, to New York, to the corporate headquarters. Can you go help them out? And again, I'm like, I don't want to go do budgeting. I don't want to be doing budget inputs and reviewing these things before we send them off to the parent company. But I did it. And, I learned the financial details of every single country in the region, which at that point was probably 65, 75 countries. So it was a great learning experience. Again, I wasn't sure why they had asked me to do it, but I did it and I did it well. So I thought, okay, now I'm going to, get a job. Now I should be prepared to go out and run my own country, my own region, and make that break into general management. But what they did is they gave me a job as being like the assistant to a senior executive in Switzerland. And again, it wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but I learned a lot of things. I learned how an executive runs their business on a day-to-day basis, how they interact with the corporate headquarters in New York, how you work with the CEO and the expectations around what executives that have profit and loss responsibility are trying to do. So again, a great experience. And then from that, after that, I did get a job running some of the fastest growing markets in the Middle East. But the reason I'm talking about it being important is what the company was doing is they were giving me a set of experiences to groom me as an executive. And I was so focused on my own career, I really didn't realize what they were giving me the opportunity to do. And what they were doing was preparing me to be a general manager by giving me all of these varied experiences in different markets. So for me, that really is probably what took me ultimately and got me on a very fast track to being a senior executive, was all those little things that I was a little bit annoyed about, but really there was a plan behind it. And that's why, when I talk about leadership and giving advice, I'm like, take all of these opportunities you can get, these developmental things, seek out the opportunities, work on a project team. It may not be what you want to do at that moment, but all of these are development experiences and you're learning additional skills, different skills than you probably are in your day-to-day job. And so by doing all of that, as I say, that kind of, to me, probably was the most meaningful group of experiences within 12 months that set me up for a successful career.
Nice. And what would you say are the critical skills required for high-level executive roles?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot you can always read about and things, but I always have like a short list that I look at when I put things together. Yeah, I think one of the things I learned early on was being authentic as a skill, is in the sense that you are who you are. And I've seen people get their first job, maybe leading a team or something, and all of a sudden they change who they are, thinking they have to be somebody else in order to be a successful leader. And my advice is always be true to yourself, be authentic to your own style and make it work. You may have to meld it a little bit to fit the environment, but you cannot change who you are fundamentally. Because if you're not authentic to yourself, people around you can see that. So being authentic is very important. Decision-making skills. Ultimately, if you're a leader, you're going to be required to make decisions, and you may not have all of the information needed to make a perfect decision every time. And that's why you also need to be comfortable with dealing with ambiguity, because you're going to be making decisions without having perfect information. As given how much information and data we have today, there is still no perfect data that allows executives to make easy, perfect decisions all the time. I also think a great leader from the beginning has to define the vision and mission clearly and then build a culture around that. I think that is absolutely critical for a leader, whether you're leading a team, a division, a company, whatever it is. And part of that culture is, of course, inspiring the people around you and making sure there is a level of inspiration and motivation for people within your team and within your organization. And that is, a very important leadership skill as well. Yeah. And lastly, I think, yeah, I could name more, but I think always stay positive and be humble. I can tell you early on in my career, I was given leadership roles at a relatively young age. And, I just maybe wasn't as humble as I could have been at the beginning, thinking that I was somehow special getting these roles at a young age. And being humble is important, and that's very important in building a team and having people believe in you in leadership, because that's one of the most critical things of leadership is, people have to believe in you. They don't want to follow you just because you have the title or you're anointed the leader. They're going to follow you because they believe in you and you're able to inspire them. So I think those are some of the most critical things.
Yeah, I really like the point of being a lead, how you mentioned being a leader, and there's certain ways to do it. And I like to add having trust in people, people trusting you, being someone that is able that other people can go to for help. I think that's another thing that highlights what is really important about being a leader.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Brandon. And I always, there's a million definitions of what leadership is, but I have one on my desk, and it's anonymous. I don't know who it's from, but I'll read it to you right now. And it's: leadership is a privilege bestowed on you by people who believe in you. So that is the important thing. You're only a leader if people believe in you. You're not a leader because of your title. So it is a privilege, but it's only when it's given by other people. You don't give it to yourself, or your CEO can't give it to you, right? People
Yeah,
have to believe in you, as you say, and trust in you. And without that, you'll never be a great leader.
yeah, that's a great point. And then with our last question, what is your favorite reason to continue educating individuals as a professor?
Well, when I decided to leave Coke in the corporate world and kind of move back to the States, it was always on my list that I wanted to teach. And I always wanted to teach at Rider, part-time, being an adjunct. And I did find a way to do that. And the reason I wanted to do that, one is I thought, particularly in international business, I wanted to share my experiences in international business classes and international business settings. And I think the theory is very important, but I thought I could bring a lot of real life experience of running businesses all around the world. So that was kind of the one part of, well, here's something I think I can impart to the students. But the other is, it was motivating to me, and it is motivating. It helps me stay close to business, close to students, close to the generation of those students who'll be graduating, because it's a very different world than when I went to school. And so I have enjoyed that aspect of it very much. And that's why I've done the international business courses at Rider for graduates, and taking them for years on international trips around the world, visiting companies in different places. I also teach at Temple University in their MBA program, International Business. And I've done some undergraduate courses at Rider University in corporate strategy. So all those things, I like to think of it, Brandon, as a two-way street. I like to give a lot in those courses, but I like to feel I get a lot from the students as well. So I truly enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's always beneficial to have a mutual benefit off of teaching and then learning. And I see that a lot even at Rider. It's not just the teachers that are teaching, it's a lot of great students that are helping them further their careers and their knowledge, just new things that they're learning. So it's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as that wraps up episode 14 of 15-Minute Coffee Podcast with Brandon Salazar, I'd like to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and expertise with us. We hope you enjoyed gaining insights and exploring the world of business with us. Don't forget to check out the podcast on our social media at the 15-Minute Coffee Podcast on YouTube and Instagram for upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.